Aloha and welcome to A Course in Miracles, Workbook for Students. Today we're on Lesson 66. My happiness and my function are one. And we've been in the last few lessons since the review, we've been looking at ourselves that we are the light of the world, and our function as the light of the world is forgiveness. And today we're going to see that our happiness and our function are one and the same. So let's go ahead and read this. You have surely noticed an emphasis throughout our recent lessons on the connection between fulfilling your function and achieving happiness. This is because you do not really see the connection. Yet there is more than just a connection between them. They are the same. My happiness and my function are the same. Their forms are different, but their content is completely one. The ego does constant battle with the Holy Spirit on the fundamental question of what your function is. So does it do constant battle with the Holy Spirit about what your happiness is. It's not a two-way battle. The ego attacks, and the Holy Spirit does not respond. The Holy Spirit knows what your function is. He knows that it is your happiness. Today we will try to go past this wholly meaningless battle and arrive at the truth about your function. We will not engage in senseless arguments about what it is. We will not become hopelessly involved in defining happiness and determining the means for achieving it. We will not indulge the ego by listening to its attacks on truth. We will merely be glad that we can find out what truth is. So, this is what we're going to do. Our longer practice period today, and we'll have one in the morning, one in the evening, that's a longer one, has as its purpose your acceptance of the fact that not only is there a very real connection between the function God gave you and your happiness, but they are actually identical. God gives you only happiness. Therefore, the function He gave you must be happiness, even if it appears to be different. Today's exercises are an attempt to go beyond these differences in appearance and recognize a common content where it exists in truth. Begin the 10 to 15 minute practice period by reviewing these thoughts. God gives me only happiness. He has given my function to me. Therefore, my function must be happiness. Now try to see the logic in this sequence, even if you don't yet accept the conclusion. It is only if the first two thoughts are wrong that God gives me only happiness, and He has given my function to me. If those two are wrong, then the conclusion that therefore my function must be happiness could be false. So let us then think about the premises for a while as we are practicing. And so the first premise is that God gives you only happiness. This could be false, of course, but in order to be false, it's necessary to define God as something that God is not. Love cannot give evil, and what is not happiness is evil. Well, God cannot give what he does not have, and he cannot have what he is not. Unless God gives you only happiness, he must be evil. And it is this definition of him you are believing if you do not accept the first premise. Now, if you were raised as in Christianity with the concept of the God of the Old Testament, it's very easy, at least for me, to see a God that was presented to me from the time I was like 2 or 3 years old that is dualistic. This God would sometimes give you happiness, but if you didn't obey his commandments, he would also punish you and give you unhappiness. And he would give, in the Old Testament, all kinds of unhappiness to all kinds of people. So if this is the concept that you have, and it's the concept that I had of God, then it's very easy to see that this first premise may not be true, that God gives only happiness. But if you think about it, what the Course is saying here, that the God of the Old Testament that you were brought up with, and I was brought up with, if we were brought up in a pretty traditional Protestant or Catholic Christianity, is not the God that the Course in Miracles is talking about. The Course in Miracles is talking about a Father who only gives good, because there is no evil in love. I was taught that God is love and God is justice. So somehow that never made sense to me. But that was the way it was always explained, how God could love you but also send you to hell for eternity if you didn't accept Jesus into your heart or whatever. But the Course doesn't teach a God like that at all. The Course teaches a non-dualistic God that is beyond any concept of evil. That the Father that the Course is talking about is not good and bad. He doesn't give good and evil like the God of the Old Testament. He only is good. He only is love. He only is peace without an opposite. So this Course is helping us to look at the ideas that we have been brought up and taught that could get in the way of us actually believing something like this, that my function and my happiness are one. And I can tell you that if you were brought up that way, the ego is going to use those ideas when you spend that 10 or 15 minutes, looking at this idea, this first premise, that does God really give you and me only happiness? So that's why in the beginning it says we're not going to argue or be drawn into arguments with the ego about what happiness is and what God is. We're just going to look at those thoughts and let them pass by. We're not going to try to justify the Holy Spirit's position in any way, because the Holy Spirit knows that the ego is insane and that there's no point in trying to explain to something that is only an insane shadow, that is not even real in the sense, other than that we have made the ego real, but in reality, the ego does not exist. The Holy Spirit doesn't even acknowledge that the ego is there. We give the ego power by believing in it, and the ego is also when you believe in that there's evil in the world, that there's devils in the world, that there's spirits and things like that. These are all symbols for the ego, but they don't really exist. The Course teaches that they don't exist. They're like the dark. Like, does the dark really exist? What happens to it when you turn on the light? It's gone. It has no way at all to hang around when the light is there, because it's just the absence of light. So anyway, the second premise is that God has given you your function. Now, we have seen that there are only two parts of your mind. One is ruled by the ego and is made up of illusions, including the ego. The ego is an illusion too. The other is the home of the Holy Spirit, where truth abides. Now, this is the split mind here. There are no other guides but these two to choose between, and no other outcomes possible as a result of your choice, but the fear of the ego, that the ego always engenders, and the love that the Holy Spirit always offers to replace it. So these are our only two choices: either to listen to the ego, which we're not going to do, or to listen to the Holy Spirit. So in this time, that's what we're going to do in these 10 to 15 minutes. We're going to hold these two premises in our mind. One, that God only gives good things to us, and two, that He has given us His function. And therefore, our function must be happiness. So, it must be that your function is established by God through His voice, or it's made by the ego, which you have made to replace God's voice. Which is true. Unless God gave you your function to you, it must be the gift of the ego. Now, you may not even believe in God. You may only believe that in your individual self. So you may see that all the gifts that come to you are the gifts of the ego. Well, does the ego really have gifts to give? Being itself an illusion and offering only the illusion of gifts. So the Course is saying the ego is illusion, only God is true, only love is true, and so these gifts that the ego gives are only illusions as well. And if you think about it, there's nothing that has really given you lasting peace or lasting happiness. Yeah, it may be you might feel great when you get something you want, but how long does that gift really last? You may feel great when you get a job and feel like that job is your function, or some relationship. Maybe you feel like to be a good boyfriend or girlfriend or lover is your function. But has any of those things ever really lasted and brought lasting happiness? So if they don't, Is lasting happiness possible? And the Course says, yes, it is. And it's your function. So, think about this. During the longer practice period today, think also about the many forms the illusion of your function has taken in your mind. Think about what are all the different ways you've thought, this is my purpose, this is my function, this is what I'm here for. And the many ways in which you have tried to find salvation under the ego's guidance. And that's the voice that predominantly we hear in our mind. Guidance, do this, do that. This will make you happy. Try this. All right? That's what the Course is calling the ego. This voice in our head. Now, did you find it? That's what we were just talking about. Did you really find happiness? Have you found happiness? Were you happy? Did these functions bring you peace? And we need to be really honest today. Remember the outcomes fairly and consider also whether it was ever reasonable to expect happiness from anything the ego ever proposed. I mean, pretty much by the time you get to my age, you don't even expect that the ego is going to be able to make you happy. The ego's primary function, normally by the time you get to my age, is survival. Just to survive. You don't even expect happiness anymore. You just expect to be able to survive. And if you can survive another day with a reasonable amount of pleasures and pains, then you feel like you made it and you can do another one. So this is kind of what you want to be looking at and thinking about during this 10 to 15 minutes in the morning and in the evening. So, remember the outcomes fairly and consider whether it is ever reasonable to expect happiness from anything the ego ever proposed. Yet, the ego is the only alternative to the Holy Spirit's voice. Remember, there's only two parts of the split mind, the ego or the Holy Spirit. So if the ego hasn't made us happy, there's only one other alternative. You will listen to madness, the ego, or hear the truth, the Holy Spirit. Try to make this choice as you think about the premises on which our conclusion rests. And the premises are, God only gives good gifts, and God has given you your function. Therefore, your function is happiness. So, we can share in this conclusion, but in no other. For God himself shares it with us. Today's idea is another giant stride in the perception of the same is the same. This is another theme you'll see in the Course over and over again, that the truth is the truth, and what is not the truth is not the truth. What is the same and what is different? This is part of what this mind training of A Course in Miracles is helping us to perceive. What is the same and what is different? That it can't be one or the other. It's either the truth is true and what is not the truth is not the truth. So, we're beginning to make a giant stride in this way of perception that the Course is leading us to. That the perception of the same is the same and the different as different. On one side stands all illusions, and all truth stands on the other. There aren't like a few truths over here and a few illusions over here. It's like one or the other. All illusions are all truth. Let us try today to realize that only the truth is true. In the shorter practice periods, which would be most helpful today, if undertaking twice an hour, like every 30 minutes, set your little timer. This form of the application is suggested. We say, think about, my happiness and my function are one because God has given me both. So that's the kind of idea we're going to bring up every 30 minutes. My happiness and my function are one. They're the same because God has given me both. It will not take more than a minute and probably less to repeat these words slowly and think about them a little while as you say them. So this is a really significant, I think, lesson for us. Because what are we really looking for in life? What do we really want beyond survival? If you still want something beyond survival, what is it that we're all looking for? We want to be happy. If you really think about it, that's what we want. I mean, you can say, well, I want to be useful, I want to be rich, I want to be famous, I want to have a nice car, I want security. But what, if you boil all those things down to one thing, what is that? Happiness. And so here it is. Our function and happiness are one. So have fun with it today, and I hope you can manage to get in those bringing up the idea every 30 minutes, because it is a mind training course, and this bringing it up every 30 minutes is part of the mind training, part of the discipline, part of the process that's going to really cause the miracle to happen, which is a change in perception. So may the miracle happen with you today, and love to you, peace to you, joy to you, aloha, and I will see you tomorrow. Mahalo.